11, and as promised, it's time to bring you that Research Matters with Kuda and Unda. Now, it's an online show that is all about communicating the research taking place at NUST in efforts to promote the university's research agenda and the impact thereof. So, of course, I'm joined by Kuda, and this is just one of those where we have conversations with very prominent people at the Namibia University of Science and Technology and just see at what their contribution is towards her research.
Exactly, that's right, Unda. Thank you so much. As always, it's great to be back. And the reason, the reason why we're doing this is sometimes research tends to be very complex and it tends to be exclusive to an exclusive audience, if I can put it that way. So this is just our attempt of bringing it down, so to put it, lack of a better word, but bringing it to the average person, to the lay person, to understand what is happening. And today we have none other than Dr. Guillermo Delgado. Now, he's the acting director of the Institute for Land, Livelihoods and Housing here at the Namibia University of Science and Technology, and he's also a senior lecturer in architecture. I'm very excited to hear about how do those two
exactly
come together. Dr. Delgado, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here.
I think we can actually start right there.
Yeah.
Tell us, how do
we go from architecture
to land? Is it?
Actually,
bring us up to speed.
that already we're speaking already about content there. Most of the work that we do, or the spirit that animates us to work, is that of transdisciplinarity, which is basically saying that we're not getting stuck too much with the discipline, because the issues that we would like to attend require much more than one professional. So if you talk about issues of land, of housing, of livelihoods, you would not just necessarily call one engineer or one sociologist or one architect. You would be better off if you would call a team of different people to look at this in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think the fact that I'm a lecturer at a certain department or section, I think, to be frank, I could be placed wherever. This institute is relatively, it's clear on what it focuses, and that's already where we're addressing content.
All right. Now, just maybe taking you back, have you always seen yourself in that architectural space? Was that always a dream you had, or how did you fall into that space?
How did you get here?
Yeah.
Well, so my interest in architecture stemmed of the interest in space, which is more about space, broadly speaking, that just buildings, as one conventionally would, relate architecture to. I think the places where we live is what interests me, be it the city or being the way that the country or the planet is arranged. Where do we put towns? Where do we put them? Where do we put roads? Mm-hmm. How do we come to plan the seas or the airwaves in space? All this is based to a certain rationale that I'm interested and, on interesting who decides and how can we shape those in, let's call it, better ways.
Mm. Wow. Now, in terms of just, if we look at it and you're speaking to a first year, for example, hypothetically, how would you explain your research interests?
Well, one of the questions that I sometimes throw in when I first meet a group of students or even just a group of people interested in the topics we deal with is, for example, to whom does the city belong?
Yeah.
And then people would say, perhaps you would get one very, vocal, if not activist person who says, well, it belongs to us. Mm-hmm. And that I think it's in many ways true. But then how do we shape it? How do we participate in making these places more like we would like them to be? So for that, you need a little bit of information, you need a little bit of tools. And I think that's a way for me to exemplify that to shape the places that we live in, we need everybody's input. So not only one discipline, but also not only one group of people, not only professionals, but we also need the youth. We also need civil society. We also need of course government, but we need many people to be able to enter this conversation.
Talking about entering conversations, and I think that actually gels in very well with my next question. You spoke about the different players that are involved in this space. Now tell us some of the projects you're currently involved in, and I think this could also be an opportunity to tell us who you partner with in these projects.
Yes, so the Institute does research, outreach, also projects, and I will explain those. And very soon we're going to start with education. Now, it sounds like I'm going backwards. People say, like, well, you're at NUST, aren't you kind of teaching or so on? And as it happens, we're an institute, so we are focused on research and outreach. But research-wise, we have two projects. The first project is on a collaboration with the University of Manchester and the Shackdollers Federation and the Namibia Housing Action Group, in very close collaboration also with the Caribbean Town Council, which is looking at the cost effectiveness of interventions in land and housing. In other words, you have local authorities servicing land themselves, but sometimes they also resort to private sector. Sometimes international partners come in, sometimes an NGO comes in, and sometimes there's a combination of the above. So all of these produce certain land and certain housing, but we often conform with, let's call it, global costs. Oh, it costs this, and it's usually a figure with just zero, closed figures. We don't really break it down to the cent. So we're doing that because we would like to find out what is the most effective way to engage with land servicing for housing provision in Namibia, because we're interested in the question of scalability. The need is very vast and the resources are very little, so how do we kind of engage with something that can make a broad impact, not simply like isolated projects, but how do we really roll out some large-scale intervention with little resources available? So that is one very kind of upfront research project. Now we also have what I said I would explain, which is projects. Now these are not research projects. Actually, our partners will get angry if we say that we are doing research. What we're developing is a series of activities together that include research but are not only about research. Those are, for example, for the development of or the revision of the national housing policy. This is part of our contribution in a task team that includes the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development, the Ministry of Finance, the National Planning Commission, the National Housing Enterprise, also the Shackdollers Federation and the Namibia Housing Action Group, and NUST as let's say the technical partner. So we're learning a lot in this project. A lot of information is being gathered, and we are gonna use that information also for for dissemination purposes. Another project that we have is a collaboration with the United Nations Human Settlement Program, which is called UN Habitat, where we developed the national strategy for informal settlement upgrading and a series of other activities related to that. We gathered vast amount of information about this key issue, informal settlement upgrading, that again is not research, but now we know a lot about them. So we're going to find ways of mobilizing this information we got towards some outputs that are not necessarily those who we're delivering. So those are projects, and those are for me very good examples of why we need land administrators, why we need planners on board, why we need economists on board. So that's all these projects have representation of all these disciplines, and they're not research per se, but we're advancing the information we've got for research purposes.
So now you've spoken extensively about the partners involved. You've even mentioned the different disciplines and the different careers that are involved to realize these projects, so to put it. Just to circle back a bit and take it back a little bit, bringing it back home. In terms of student involvement, how does that work? How do our students get involved? How are they involved in these projects?
So it would be safe to say that actually most of the members of our team are actually students of NUST, either doing their work integrated learning or simply just reaching out. It's fairly easy to reach out to us. There's a website, and now recently we became a bit more active on social media. So we will, yes. I'm not handling that, by the way. Just a disclaimer that I'm just like, I'm really supported by people who are a bit more, acquainted or skilled in that area. And we thank them for that very much. So it starts with an email or it starts with a DM. In some cases, we do have active initiatives and projects, and sometimes we don't, so we actually find out a way to work together, because all these projects are, in my view, something that I would have liked to kind of participate in any capacity, even if it is a sort of informal collaboration. We're open for that.
What inspired that song? Why do you like it so much? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's a song from a while back, almost like you could say almost 100 years if one is broad with numbers, but it speaks to something that we're also seeing today. I mean, which is a lot of the work we do is on the question of informal settlements in Namibia, and I think few people know that this is one of the most substantive transformations in the country, considering after independence. So 1990, when Namibia became independent, there were very few informal settlements. Actually, it was considered an emerging phenomenon, and they were very localized, only a few. And come end of 2018, 2020, and some of the figures that we have from the Shackles Federation tells us that, well, now most of the people that live in urban areas, which by now are the majority of the people in the country, live in an informal settlement. So that transformation happening only in 20 years, it's substantive, and that's why it's so important to discuss how to go about this, because it is without any intervention, this will just continue to grow. And I think this song speaks a little bit about, how is it to live in quotation marks in the ghetto, which in Namibia would be in an informal settlement.
Now I need to look at the lyrics again and properly apply my mind to it. That was very interesting. Now, as we move on, what are some of the problems or challenges you hope to address in your work? Now we know that there's so much going on in the land space, be it service provision, be it allocation of land. Land is a hot topic. What would you say are some of the problems, if you could just single out a few, and how do we resolve them?
Yeah, so I would say that one of the key issues is, I think I mentioned already one, which is transdisciplinarity, that before there was a lot of compartmentalization. So an engineering issue was given to the engineers, and ultimately urban issues were assigned to planners, town planners. Now I think we're transitioning to urban planners, but as I said, we do need broader skill sets to be able to address this. So transdisciplinarity, or the lack of transdisciplinarity, is one of the things we would like to address. A second one would be the delayed transformation. So there has been, and that has to do with the kind of approaches that are taken. So we are looking at a situation in which there is not, the cities in which we inhabit today are not substantively different in nature as they were before. Maybe they're larger, maybe they are there's more informal settlements, but are they really substantively different? What did we really changed? And so if we would like to answer those questions, we need to perhaps come up with new approaches, with new kinds of conversations, and that I think is, on the one hand side, the other aspect that we would like to address. So the delayed transformation and the lack of variety of approaches.
All right, now overall, what contribution has your research done basically towards making the world a better place, like Michael
large,
Jackson
eh?
once said.
Let's go there.
Yeah.
I think that what we would like to really do is to create the platforms or the spaces or the situations to define what better means to all of us. I think we take it for granted, and I think and it is not an easy answer. Yes, we need more houses. Yes, we need more serviced land. But which kind of service land? Where is this land? Where are these houses? How are these houses? Are they still made for, let's say, a nuclear family, as it was the ideal for, imposed by whatever criteria? Or is it also in the edge of urban areas? Because of course there's affordable land. Can we think of perhaps affordable land in places, or affordable housing in places that are, for example, exclusive, to create, for example, mixed income situations? So to ask these questions, what better means, it's what we would like to contribute, not to come with a sort of finished recipe, but to be able to decide collectively, asking new questions with a new set of people, not only professionals, not only government, and to be able to engage with these questions. What is it, the kind of places we would like to be? What's better, in short?
Okay, great. Now, if you could give advice to your younger self, when you first started doing research, what would you say? The reason why we came up with this question is actually when you're first starting out, you're looking at a whole staircase. Everything looks so impossible. Research just sounds, you're literally just doing it, to be honest, to get that degree. Then you're like, okay, I'll figure it out when I get on to the next stage. But if you had to look back, if you had to take a few steps backward, what would you say to your younger self?
I really like this question, and to me, it would be something that it starts really when you start. There is not really if I look back, whenever I remember that I started to do research, well, I was probably in my late teens studying architecture, and I thought, this is preliminary. I'm just training, I'm just warming up. And looking back, I realized that already then I was doing research. I was engaging with questions. I was being systematic about addressing certain questions, and I think there's value on all this. So I think the message is it starts really when you start, and particularly in the field in which we operate, which is, broadly speaking, let's say, urban development. The good news is that there's no urban science in quotation mark. So basically, you don't, even though there's vast amounts of literature on cities and urban development and so on, there's not really a sort of method that can claim, we know how to do this. People can apply social science methods, but more and more new approaches gain legitimacy. So cultural production, performance, autoethnography, and those it's not an exclusive field. So the invitation is really to really regard the very first steps as steps in their own right.
I wouldn't have said it any better, but that intrigues me. Would you say that is your life motto as well, or does that only apply to research? You begin when you begin.
Well, I think that every action has its value, and I think there's an inherent curiosity or interest to really come to terms with how do cities work, or how do we really change the places we live, because I think there is a very strong desire for something else, for transformation, and I believe very strongly that this is almost like a right, because the places we live change ourselves, and nobody can take away from us the right to change ourselves. So I think that is a very strong desire that people have. So the steps that we take to learn a bit more about the places we live and to find ways to transform them, I think it's legitimate, and the ways in which this happens, the methods which it happens, are, I think, still today open for grabs. The question is still out there.
We absolutely just love the way you're so focused and you're like, this is what I'm doing and I'm so in it and you're so passionate about it. But come on, did you always know that this is what you wanted to do? Were you always this focused?
Yeah.
Please inspire us. Tell us you were lost at some stage.
No, really, I think we all want to know or sort of have this idea that we struggled at some point. All of us, we figured it out, and then when we figured it out, we had it and we ran with it. Yeah. But did you always have it figured out?
Okay.
Honestly.
Look at us pushing it. Yeah. Tell us the truth.
So that's, I mean, what I have to say is that I think the interest on, let's say, space was always there. What I have doubts was more the way in which I was doing. At some stage I felt lost not lost, but like I was, let's say, going too broad. I started to, for example, in 2010, we did an exhibition. It was frankly an exhibition at the National Art Gallery called Legacies of a Colonial Town. And it was a collage between photographs and drawings and maps and so on. And I knew we were doing, very frankly, an exhibition that by all means was an art exhibition. But at the same time, I was very clear that we were, let's say, still exploring the issues we were interested in. At some stage, I was also joining an NGO that did education and training for the labor movement and on issues of housing and living conditions. And I thought, well, haven't I kind of like branched out too far? But in a way, it put me in touch with a very vibrant civil society sector that remains, familiar to me to this day. So I think the ways in which we engage, we might feel a little bit, perhaps that we've maybe went too far, but I think the invitation would be also, go for it, embrace it, take part fully, and maybe there's a sort of, threading line between everything that one is doing.
Indeed, there's always a lesson in each and every experience. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Delgado. And just like that, our time is up.
Shame, man. I was about to start having fun, like real fun, But I mean, they do say good things come to those who wait. So you'll have to wait for another episode of Research Matters with Kuda and Unda. But of course, Dr. Delgado, thank you so much for having made time to be here and just discussing research in itself and why it matters so much, especially in your field. But just like that, we've come to the end. Thank you so much for tuning in to NUST FM, where we stay reinventing sound. Of course, for more details on the next Research Matters with Unda and Kuda, you can follow the Research, Innovation and Partnership at NUST pages, that is on Facebook and LinkedIn, as well as the NUST FM pages on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. We are on TikTok as well, wink wink. You can catch us there. But of course, that is all we have for you for today. We have one more request that will get you on your feet, and this is CK with Love Mwantiti. I hope I pronounced that right. And this is a special request by Dr. Delgado. Do stick and stay to NUST FM.